पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौः शान्तिर् दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर् नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the Divine Presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya, avirāvirmayedhi, rudrayatte dakshinam mukham, te namam pahi nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We begin today on verse number 23. That's on page 255 of your books. So let us chant together. Yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha prayata yanti tam kalam vakshyami bharatarshabha. The time at which departing from hence the yogis attain non-return or return, that time, O best of Bharatas, I shall tell you. You might remember that this chapter, chapter 8, begins with a set of questions. And the last question was regarding death. That what happens after death? Where does the soul go? What is the experience that the soul has? And that question is being answered in the set of verses that we are studying. The verse that we concluded the last class with, verse 22, said, that Supreme Being, O Partha, in whom are all beings and by whom all this is pervaded, is attainable by one-pointed devotion. So the earlier verse pointed out that a single-minded devotion to the spiritual ideal, we attain that highest being, and that's the supreme goal. So that's the ultimate goal of all spiritual life. Now, one who attains that goal, then the matter ends right there. What about those who don't attain that goal? Because time is passing, whether we attain it or not, sooner or later we are going to die. So the only option is either we attain that goal before we die or we die. So then the question is, what happens after death? So to very quickly summarize the whole scenario, in order for us to become enlightened, it is not necessary to die. So the experience of God realization can come anytime, even right now. In order to experience heaven, we need to die. That cannot come now. But in order to become enlightened, we can become enlightened right now. And what does enlightenment mean from a Vedantic perspective? Enlightenment means to know that I am the Spirit, not just intellectually, but to experience oneself as the Spirit. Experiencing oneself as that infinite Spirit automatically means recognizing I am not this body, I am not this mind. If I am not this body or mind, then there is no death for me, because death is only the destruction of this body. And once I know I am not the body, that doesn't mean the body won't die. The body will perish. As any material entity, the body will follow the laws of matter. But the destruction of body will not appear to be my destruction. And that's why I can become enlightened right now. The body will die when it's time for it to die. The mind will get disintegrated, that also being material. So an being who is enlightened right now doesn't go anywhere. Because if you are everywhere, you cannot go anywhere. But what if we are not enlightened? So it's time to die now, and we haven't become enlightened yet. What it means is I'm still encased by this body and mind. My existence, I see, is still identified with this body and mind. And therefore, because I'm still limited, I have to go somewhere after death. The body, of course, will remain here. But then the mind, the ego, the subtle body still remains, and that is also material. So along with that Sukshma Sharira, I will go somewhere. In broad terms, we know which are the places to go. Popularly, we speak about Swarga and Naraka, that a heaven, a good place and a bad place. A place where there is a lot of enjoyment, a place where there is a lot of torture. But let's look at it a little bit more deeply. We have seen that depending on the amount of good we have done, depending on the intensity of the good we have done, it wouldn't be fair if there were just one uniform place to go to. So because people have done good to different degrees, they should, just for the sake of justice, experience different levels of happiness. And in order to make place for the different levels of happiness, in the books they mention different kinds of lokas, different kinds of swargas. So Chandra Loka, Surya Loka, and there are any number, as much as you can imagine. And I say you can imagine because the question is, how can you imagine? How many lokas are really there? And the answer is, well, really there are no lokas at all. Really just one infinite being. So don't speak about reality. Other than that one infinite being, everything is only an appearance. And since it's an appearance, you have freedom to imagine. If you would like to have 50 different spheres, 50 different kinds of heavens, you're welcome to it. It's up to you. What we can do is what the books describe. The books describe different kinds of heavens, and among them, the highest is considered Brahmaloka. That's like the 5-star of heavens. Now, what about those spiritual seekers who have struggled sincerely to attain God realization, but their efforts have fallen a little bit short? So it's time to die. They haven't realized God yet, but they are sincere seekers. But because they are good people, because unless we are good, we cannot anywhere go near to that, make progress spiritually. So even these spiritual seekers will go to that Brahmaloka, the highest of heaven. But again, because they are spiritual seekers, just as there are distractions on this world, there will be many more distractions in Brahmaloka. And you have descriptions in the books, Apsara singing and a lot of somarasa and all kind of things. So there's going to be a lot of distraction there. But if I am focused on my spiritual life here, after dying, since I'm carrying the same mind there, I will remain focused on my spiritual life even in Brahmaloka. I will not get distracted there. I might find some tree or some corner and continue to do my japa and meditation even in Brahmaloka. And so what little was remaining for my enlightenment, I will finish it there and then become liberated from there. I don't have to come back again here. But such people are always going to be few. Some spiritual seekers, moderate spiritual seekers, may have been able to resist the distractions on this planet. But maybe when they go to Brahmaloka, those distractions are just too powerful. And so then these moderate spiritual seekers who haven't been too advanced will get distracted there. And then have a good time in Brahmaloka, but as soon as their good karma is exhausted, they will be born again here. But luckily, If you have been spiritual seeker, then if you have made some progress, that's not lost. So you then continue your spiritual life from where you had taken a sabbatical, so to speak, and then continue from there. Not everyone is a spiritual seeker. So there are people who do a lot of good things with the expectation that they will be rewarded later on. So such people will also go to the different heavens, and after their punya is exhausted, then they will be born again here. There will be other people who have done a lot more bad than good. Then such people will go to some other spheres where there'll be more pain than joy. So there are all these possibilities. Either you go to this highest place or you go to these kind of lower heavens. Or you can go to sometimes it's like a 1-star hotel you go, it's like, oh, there is so much to complain about. So it's kind of okay, but there is also a lot of complaints. So hells are a little bit like that. Hells also will have, I hope I'm not frightening you all with all these descriptions. So hells also can be of various degrees. I'm just saying what the books mention. Then they say that those people who are extremely bad, who it will be difficult to find any good that they have done, they don't go anywhere. So the extremely good, the enlightened people don't go. They are enlightened here itself. The extremely bad, they are immediately reborn. After death, they are immediately reborn into some, like, maybe some insects or God knows what. But the books describe that in some lower forms of life, they are immediately born. Now, you might ask, what is the proof that all this happens? And the answer is, there is no proof. This is what the books say. If you don't like it, then try to find some other book which gives some other explanation. If you like none of these things, you can come up with your own explanation, because there is no way to verify this. And the good thing is, from a Vedantic, but there is no need to verify this. It's a little bit like this. If, for instance, now, take this modern fairy tales, for instance, or modern fiction, say Harry Potter or the Lord of the Rings. We know that these books, and then later on movies when they came, they captured the imagination of a lot of people of our generation. Now, is there, people can argue a lot taking some of the characters from these stories and saying whether this person is like this, or should this person have done this on that? Should this place be like this or that? You can argue, you can have seminars on it. But all said and done, ultimately it's all fiction still. So it really doesn't matter. If you would like to visualize these stories in some different way or create some different ending for it, you still can do it, because it's still fiction. And that's why neither the Gita nor the Upanishads they are not very fanatical about how exactly each heaven is, because from that perspective of that highest standpoint, it's still a kind of fairy tale. Because the reality is that Brahman alone exists, and that's infinite. With all this long introduction now, let's look at the verse that we just chanted. The time at which departing from hence the yogis attain non-return or return, that time I shall tell you. So there are two possibilities. After dying, you either return back to this planet or you don't return. So those paths of return or non-return, Krishna is going to describe. The time at which departing, this is an important thing. Oftentimes the books do describe which is an auspicious time to die, time of the day or time of the year There's often said that there are two paths by which people go. One is called the Uttarayana, the northern path, and Dakshinayana, the southern path. Now, this north-south has nothing to do with our notions of north or south. But because the word time is used, and because we tend to take things in a very gross way, we immediately connect it with our notions of time in terms of hours, minutes, or months and days. But really, as the Gita points out, and the commentaries on the Gita point out, by time is not really meant the time itself, but the devata, the deity associated with each of these things. So in the next 2 or 3 verses, Krishna will describe where do these souls go. It's a very brief and concise description. You'll hardly get any idea what exactly happens other than just take it or leave it kind of explanation. Some of the commentators then go into a little bit details about it. If you are interested, you can go through those details. But as I said, there is no verification for any of this. So read it like a story. So verse 24. Agnirjyotirah shuklaha Shanmasa uttarayanam Tatra prayata gachanti Brahma Brahma vido janaha. Fire, the flame, the day, the bright half of the month, and the 6 months of the sun's northern course, departing by this path, the knowers of Brahman attain Brahman. This is that path of going to Brahmaloka, that highest path. And although these things are mentioned, fire, flame, the day, bright half of the month is called the Shukla Paksha, when the moon becomes bigger and bigger and ends with the full moon night. And the 6th month of the sun's northern course, so that's when the sun is in the northern hemisphere. Now, these entities, by these entities is simply meant the deity identified with these things. So it's really not it's not simply like fire or flame. It's the consciousness associated with these things, the devata associated with these things. So after the soul dies, if that soul has to go to that highest loka, then the deity associated with fire then guides. So these deities guide the soul. So the deity associated with Agni then hands it over to the deity associated with the flame or the light, then the deity associated with day, and so on. So these different deities then guide the soul, pass it on to the next person until you reach that highest loka. And after reaching that highest loka, if your life has been dedicated to meditating on God, doing spiritual practice here, you can continue doing it there if you don't get distracted. Otherwise, you can simply go have a good time there. It's a lot more enjoyable place than this earth is. A lot less problem, may not have lots of blizzards. You may not have to shovel any snow. And then afterwards you'll have to come back again. So that's the northern path. Verse 25. Dhumo ratris tatha Krishnaha Shanmasa dakshinayanam Tatra chandramasam jyotihi Yogi prapya nivartate. Smoke, the night, the dark half of the month, and the 6 months of the sun's southern passage, departing by this path, the yogi attains the lunar sphere and returns then. So this is the second path, the Dakshinayana. So Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. So the 2 paths are described here, depending on the karma of that person, how this person has lived their life here, what kind of karma they have done, whether they have accumulated punya or papa. Depending on that, your future course of your route will be determined depending on how you have lived your life here. Verse 26. Shukla Krishne gati yete jagata shashvate mate ekaya yatyana vrittim anyaya vartate punaha. These two paths of the world, the bright and the dark, are considered to be eternal. By one returns not, and by the other, one returns. Just to clarify, by one returns not should be understood to mean by only those who continue to not get distracted and continue practicing will return not. Other than that, everyone will return. So that's the only way. If you don't want to come back, then continue with your spiritual practice after death. If you want to come back, stop doing a spiritual practice. You see, it's like this. Although we say an enlightened being is free, an enlightened being is not completely free. There is one very interesting verse, or a Sanskrit verse, which says that once you know the truth, once you have overcome ignorance, you are going to be liberated. You have no choice. So if you want to remain bound, don't strive for knowledge. Because once you have gotten knowledge, then you cannot really say, oh, I would like to stay here a little longer. Too late. And so you have complete freedom. That's the idea. Verse 27. Naite sriti partha janan yogi muhyati kaschana tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjuna. Knowing these paths, O Partha, no yogi is deluded. Therefore, at all times, O Arjuna, be endowed with yoga. Why is the yogi not deluded after knowing these paths? But what do these paths teach us? Very simply this. If you go, you will come. The only exception is if you go and continue to do your spiritual practice, that's the only way you will not come. And you will not be able to continue doing your spiritual practice there if you are not doing it here. So you can't say, oh, I will not bother now, only after going to Brahmaloka I will do it. We will not actually even go there. So in order to go to Brahmaloka, we really must be striving hard. So I think a practical approach by a spiritual seeker should be, don't think of Brahmaloka at all. Don't think of going anywhere at all. Have as your goal, I want to be enlightened before I die. I want to be enlightened. And since we don't know when we are going to die, begin with the determination, I want to get enlightened as soon as possible. One of the greatest obstacles in our practice, whether it's prayer, meditation, worship, one of the greatest obstacles is the feeling or the idea that enlightenment is going to take a long time. It's far away. And I think that idea should be completely given up. We must have faith in ourselves. We must have faith in the grace of God. If God's grace can come, we can become enlightened right now, this very moment. and God's grace can come anytime. So when we already assume that God realization is going to come after a long time, we are showing a lack of faith in grace. And we are showing what happens is this. Think about it this way. If you are say decided to go someplace and you know that that place is very far away, that there is no way you're going to be able to reach it soon, that takes away your intensity to reach that place. You say, well, it's going to take a long time. Let me just take it easy, take it slowly, because it's going to take a long time anyway. On the other hand, if you say, no, that place is just here. You see, those of you who have made a pilgrimage in these, there are these 4 major shrines in the Himalayas. One at the source of the Ganga called Gangotri, one at the source of Yamuna called Yamunotri. There is one Shiva temple called Kedarnath. Of course, Kailash also is in the Himalayas, but there is no temple there. And there is a Vishnu temple called Badri Narayan. And nowadays, to Gangotri and Badri, they have made sufficiently good roads. The bus takes you right pretty close to the temple itself. The other 2, the final stretch of almost close to approximately 10 miles, you have to walk. And that's a very steep walk at a very high altitude. And that's tough. But people do all this pilgrimage for a long time. People from distant places come and they walk. Young, old, of all ages, everyone comes. And so as you are going up to the shrine, there are other people who have finished their darshan and they are coming down. So you are just seeing, and what happens is these people are going up are tired, of course, you see. The people are coming down are a little satisfied. They have had this darshan, and going down is also equally difficult, but it's less strenuous in many ways, because at least you're not fighting against gravity. So oftentimes, those of you who have gone there may have experienced this. Those who are going up, they will sometimes ask the people who are coming down, "Aur kitna dur hai?" how far is it? And that time, generally, even though the place may still be some distance, people will say, "Ab bhi aa gaya, it's right here, little bit more." Because what that does is, if you show that hope, yes, it's not that far, then you say, okay, I can do it. On the other hand, if someone asks you how far is it and you say, oh, it's terrible, it's far away and you'll never be able to make it, say something like that, then that doesn't work. And so that applies to us when we do our spiritual practice. If I tell myself, oh, I'm never going to realize God, it's so difficult, it's so far away, I'm never going to be able to then focus on my practice. And so when we sit for meditation, we must sit with this conviction, not just that I'm going to be enlightened soon, not just that I'm going to be enlightened in this life. Why not sit and say, if it be the will of God, I might be enlightened today. So sit for your meditation with the idea that I could be enlightened. And you're not wrong. Who can say for sure they will not be enlightened? Sri Ramakrishna gives the example that people who go fishing, if you just sit there and say, oh, I'm never going to catch fish, I'm just passing time here, then even if the fish come, you will completely ignore it. You won't even know. But if you're just sitting there at any moment, as soon as I see some movement, I can just pull up my fishing rod. Or I've never done fishing, so I don't know the terminology. But if you are alert, then you have a better chance of doing it. So similarly, we must be alert that God might show himself or herself in our heart any moment. So we have to be very vigilant. And that is why the yogi, the yogi thinks about these two paths, whether the northern path or the southern path, and recognizes either of these paths means coming back to this troubled samsara and going through all these hassles and again being trapped within this body. I don't want to do it. And so my goal is not to go either by the northern path or southern path. My goal is to be enlightened. And that's what is meant by saying such a yogi is not deluded. Verse 28. Vedeshu yajneshu tapassu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam atyeti tat sarvamidam viditva yogi param sthanam chadyam. Whatever good result is declared regarding the Vedas, sacrifices, asceticism and gifts, all that the yogi who knows the above transcends and attains the primeval supreme abode. So in the books, there are a lot of results mentioned, that if I study the Vedas, if I do these different kinds of worship, if I practice austerities, if I give gifts, if I help the needy, all of these things will lead to some good result. Now, a yogi who knows answers to all those questions asked at the beginning of the chapter and the answers given. So, essence, whatever we have learnt in this chapter, a yogi is not some kind of a special person who descends from heaven. All of us are potential yogis. So if we reflect deeply on the teachings given in this chapter and then try to practice it in our own lives, guide our own lives based on these teachings, then we become yogis ourselves. And then we will transcend these limited fruits given by the study of the Vedas, doing worship, practicing austerities, helping the needy. All of these will lead to good results. But we get a result much better, much higher than all of that. And that is the supreme goal, that highest joy which nothing in the world can give us. That is how this chapter concludes. That was the final verse of this chapter 8. Do you have any comments or questions or ideas about whatever we have seen either today or any of the earlier verses that we have seen in this chapter? Yeah, yes.
Swamiji, my question is, throughout the life we had kind of learned a lot of things which we need to kind of go back and probably wash it out. I'm just wondering whether attaining that enlightenment becomes easier when you are at early age, or it becomes easier when you are at at older age, because I think you have a lot of things accumulated in your mind. If you're not doing it from the beginning, then you have a lot of these things which you need to take it out from your mind.
I think age doesn't matter, because I mean literally we are trillions of years old. I mean, this body may not be equally old, but the soul and the sukshma sharira has been we are not just accumulating stuff in this life. We have accumulated a lot of stuff in our millions of lives before. So I think age in this life is I don't think is a factor. Having said that, it's true that the earlier we start, the better. There is no doubt about it. But I don't think it's a very defining factor.
this is my first time here, so pardon me if my question doesn't make sense. So, enlightenment, as you said, that I can start meditating with the idea that I might get it today if God permits, right? So, uh, no, I don't know what it feels like, but when it does it stay with you, or you forget the next day and you start again? That state of enlightenment.
Say that again.
So once you have reached the state of enlightenment, does it stay with you, or next day you start that journey again?
No. If it doesn't stay, then it was not enlightenment.
Okay.
Enlightenment means knowledge, and once knowledge comes, ignorance goes away. So
Okay.
It doesn't come back again. Okay, so then we conclude this chapter here, and then when we meet next week, we will begin with chapter 9 of the Gita. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. On Sunday, we will have the Rama festival. We celebrate according to the Tithi, Ram Navami comes on Saturday, but we will observe it here on Sunday with a short worship. There will be music, there will be a talk, and the subject will be learning from Hanuman. And as we do every year, there will be a short annual meeting after that, followed by a potluck lunch. So all of you are invited, most welcome. Because there is the Rama festival on Sunday, we will not have the Arati and meditation on Saturday this week. Next week we'll have the Arati as usual on Tuesday, and the Gita study we will continue on next Wednesday when we will begin chapter 9 when we meet next week. We'll conclude with a prayer now on page 3 of your books. Om. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.